Welcome back to another episode of Rapid Fire brought to you by SimpliFaster.com. Today we have on NCAA champ, two times, right? Two-time
Two
champ,
time, two time.
uh, Molly Binetti with South Carolina women's basketball. Thanks for your time today, Molly. How's it going?
Good, Justin. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm glad we finally got a chance to connect.
So let's get right into it. Something that I noticed about your programming that I really like is your use of, gymnastics, tumbling, rolling, falling, all these types of like playful movements. And I just wanted to know kind of what are the benefits that you're seeing from that, and then what sparked your interest in adding that to your programming.
Yeah, I think I'll start with kind of what sparked my interest was more so just a shift in sort of how I viewed my role and responsibility in development. And I think when you're first brought into this field, you're really just taught about strength, speed, and power and how to train those things, but you're not really taught to think in systems. And when I think about athleticism, the best athletes are not just they're not always the strongest, the fastest, or the most powerful, but they're the best movers. And they're really good at maneuvering a lot of favorable and unfavorable positions. They're super coordinated, they're rhythmic, they're fluid, they're smooth. They can move in a variety of different ways. And so, just people that I've learned from, and then just sort of my overall kind of shift in philosophy of how I view training athleticism, like the benefits of some of those ground-based movements and just developing the coordination piece and like you said, the playfulness of it too. Like I think play is such an important piece to incorporate, especially in a college weight room environment, because especially with hoopers, like they don't necessarily always want to lift. So like
Hmm.
finding ways to get them engaged and have them just have fun is a huge component. But I think some of the benefits of it, just like I said before, like the coordination piece, training the nervous system, but really just like the overall vestibular, proprioception, balance, just kind of getting into some of those non-traditional movements. And at the end of the day, too, like these athletes have to learn how to fall. They have to learn how to get back up off the ground. I mean, a perfect example in our game the other day, one of our players dove for a loose ball, ended up being a jump ball and completely somersaulted over another player, like very similar to what we do all the time. I told her, I'm like, this is exactly why we do that.
Yes.
No, there's so many benefits too, and I think for female athletes too, there's a relative strength component too when you're incorporating ground-based crawling, rolling, things like that, gymnastics movements. It's really important for just their overall strength and development.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this is kind of a follow-up question, but I have a theory that, some of the best basketball players are so skilled, right? Like they're just so skilled nowadays. But at a young age, because of their skill at an early age, they'll kind of, I guess, get exploited for the sake of winning. So a coach will notice that, oh, you're really skilled. Let's put you on this elite team and let's skip some development so that we can just win more games. Whether that's malicious or not by the coach, that's kind of how it happens. And so I feel like a lot of really good athletes, especially the type of basketball players that you're working with, may lack those skills because at some point they probably skip some of those steps to go play high level basketball. And in doing that, we're not exposed to some of those things. Would you kind of agree with that, or am I off?
No, I think I tell people all the time, like, everyone always tells me like, "Oh, your job is so easy. Like you get these high level players, right?" And uh, like I really categorize them into three different sort of buckets. And I would say 80% of the players that we get are super, super high skill level, like you said, but very average athletically and movement
Mm-hmm.
skill wise. And then you've got the 10% that come in and they have a super high athleticism, great movers, super athletic, but very average skill level, like just kind of scratching the surface there. And then you've got another 10% that are super high athleticism and super high skill. Like a perfect example of that on our roster right now is Malaysia Fulwiley. But like 80% of those players that we get, super high skill, very average in the weight room, or very little experience in the weight room prior to coming here as well too. And so there's so much potential and so much like the ceiling is so high in that area to develop some of these athletic skills to really kind of coincide and blend with that skill level.
Yeah, one of the most annoying things that I hear a lot is like the notion that it's just so easy to train pros and high level athletes. And it just, the people who say that honestly usually have never worked with that style of athlete because it comes with a handful of challenges that are so far from the norm. So, kind of leads me to my next question. And a lot of people don't know the range of training age that you could, inherit on a roster like yours and or any college level roster. So, can you talk about some of the, what you see from year to year and just how you navigate that broad training age, like kind of what you just said, like with the buckets of, all different varieties of styles of athletes?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most of them do have a pretty low training age when they come in. You might get the occasional one or two on a roster that have had some significant experience, but for the most part, everything is so new to them. And I think it's really important to expose them to a variety of different movement patterns, a variety of different training methods really early on in the process too. And I think the biggest thing is like I like to really give them a lot of say and choice in some of the things that we're doing because like you said there are a lot of challenges to working with basketball players and a lot of it comes from just the trust and the engagement and the buy-in and them getting to believe that what they're doing is actually helping them, right? So I think kind of dealing with so many different backgrounds and experiences and skill levels and movement skill levels, like exposing them to a variety of things right off the bat and really just being aware of what's sticking and what's not, what's working well and what's not, and getting their feedback as well too, and setting them up and putting them in a position to succeed. And I mean, it's really simple stuff, right? Like I really think of it, we're lucky. Like I know things are changing with the transfer portal, but our players come and they stay. I can
Hmm.
count on one hand the number of players that have transferred out or that have even transferred in. So like I'm getting these athletes for 3, 4 years for sure. So I view it as a very much a slow cooking process. So it's really what is like the lowest hanging fruit for this player and like what are they having success with? What are they responding well to? What do they like and what are they choosing to do? And starting there. And each person and each player's journey is very different, and what that looks like in their development and figuring out what exactly we need from them. And then also like what is like the highest reward with the lowest risk. That's always what it comes back to is like how like what we do in here should never interfere with their development on the court. And so it takes time and it takes more effort to like really be intentional with being individual in that regard in a team setting, but it's really at the end of the day like that's our responsibility is to prepare them for what that person needs, not what everybody needs
Hmm.
on a global scale.
Yeah. So, follow up question to that, kind of like on the programming side. I'm not sure if you're responsible for other teams or if you're just with women's basketball, but what is your programming style? Is every player getting their own program? Or are you kind of a bucketing them and putting them in, three buckets, or how's that look for you on your team?
Yeah, so I just work with women's basketball. And so it is a very individual approach. And I think 95% of them all need very similar things, right? And then it's within that sort of 5% of where are you accounting for those individual differences. And some of that will come from, we do use force plates. So I'm able to really look at some different force and power and speed characteristics there and sort of bucketing them based on what I'm seeing from some of their jump profiling. I look at different positional needs, and it's just small changes. It's not like it's entirely overhauling an entire
Hmm.
program. But I think in the environment of a college team sports, there are so many variables that affect what's happening day to day. So like where I used to just write out weeks of programming at a time and you're super specific with all of that, like it is a very flexible day-to-day approach. Like obviously
Yeah.
what you want to accomplish long term and what you want to accomplish at different parts of the season, but how you get to that point looks very different for each individual and just different by the day because there's so many things you can't account for. So I think the reality of college like periodization and programming, it's like anybody who's writing out these 4 to 6, 8 week programs and just like giving it to them and each player has their sheet, like I don't know how y'all do it because we like we don't I've never I can't remember the last time I like gave somebody a sheet with a program on it or like even just
Yeah.
built it out in Excel because but I think like the longer you're in it the more experience you have and the deeper understanding of what it is that you're trying to achieve, that how you get there doesn't really matter. But I think my style is kind of like I said before, like creating a partnership and like figuring out what works for each athlete and what they're going to do and what they're going to work hard at, and not just like what I think is best for that person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One more kind of light bulb went off when you were talking about the fact that you guys don't get a lot of transfers in or transfers out. And then obviously in the women's side, they have to be graduated to declare for the WNBA, or at least
Yeah, you have to be
a certain
22
age.
or you have to be 22 or you have to have a degree. Yep.
So there's no one and dones. There's in your case not a ton of transferring, which is like amazing for the sake of their development. Do you think, this is totally off the script, do you think there will ever be a change with the WNBA declare age or draft, or they might leave that alone? Because I think there's obviously pros and cons that come with something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we get to a point where there is that sort of stability because, like, you have the NBA, even if you're a one and done, like, if you're not making it on an NBA roster, you've got the G League, you've got other options to play. Like,
Hmm.
for WNBA players, you're seeing it grow and you're seeing some of these off-season leagues come about, but there's still really no, like, developmental league for these players. So you got a player that leaves a year, like, you don't have a degree, the chance of you making a WNBA roster is slim to none. Even as a first round pick right now, you see lottery picks that don't even end up making a final roster. So there's just no stability, and you're not setting them up for success to have a career in the WNBA. And then if you're leaving without a degree, then you're not setting them up for success if they're not playing
Right.
basketball too. So right now, like the landscape is just not there to where I think it makes sense, right? And then monetarily, like you're looking at two completely different ball games from professional men's player to a professional women's player. Now, I think the way that it's growing right now, I don't know if that will ever change. I think we're probably a ways off from that. I hope we get to a point where that's a legit option for some of these players. But then you look at the NIL aspect of it too, like why not stay in college for as long
Yeah.
as you can? Because you're probably gonna make more money in college than you do as a NBA or professional player anyway.
Yep.
So I don't know. It's really changing fast. But until there's, I think, an infrastructure in place to really set these players up for success as a pro, like you're not going to see a change.
Yeah, totally agree. Hopefully, one day there's, like you said, there's some type of option or a G League situation or just more WNBA teams would be amazing.
Yeah, more roster spots.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to some of the training stuff that you guys are doing and talk about some tech. So you mentioned force plates. What are some of the pieces of sports tech that you guys are using, and how has that kind of impacted the program?
That's really it, honestly. We have force plates, which is I guess we've had them for 3 years now, so fairly recent. Besides that, I mean, we still use a just jump mat, and that's what I used prior to a force plate as well too. And like when it comes to tech, that's really it. We do use Kinexon. We wear sensors in our practices and games from, movement analysis standpoint and load monitoring, things like that. But besides that, like we don't have VBT, we don't have that kind of budget. We don't really rely on those types of resources. And not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think, been really good at kind of using a bare bones approach. And it gives us valuable information and insights into obviously different qualities and characteristics that we're trying to train. But besides that, I think like really good coaching doesn't need any of those things. And there's something to be said for a coach's eye. And is it technical or objective? Maybe not, but I don't know that it needs to be.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of subjective areas of performance that, like, as coaches, we really crave control and we crave data and we crave this like objective like validation of what we're doing, right? But I think when you can be okay living in that gray area and living with the subjective and like really getting good at making decisions based off of like the relationships that you have and the information that you're getting and like the overall bigger picture stuff, I think there's something to be said for that too. So we don't use a lot, but obviously the force plates and the jumping information does help us, guide some decision making when it comes to programming. And obviously, knock on wood, if an injury does happen, that information is really valuable to have in that return to performance process.
for sure. So is there a wish list that you have? Is there something that you've been eyeing, or you're like, "Yeah, that would be nice to have," or are you just like, I'm good where we're at. We're champs, so it's working.
I'm kind of like, I don't know that there is a wish list. Like, and because of just the nature, like there are very few athletes that really, I think, require like a really deep dive. And I think you almost have to, at least I found in our environment, like because they inherently don't like training in general. And like obviously that's my job to get them to want to be a part of that process, right? Like that's my number one goal. Like I feel like the psychological aspect of coaching is almost like where I put like my eggs in my
Mm,
basket and creating an environment that they just want to like they actually want to be a part of and they want to train and have fun and things like that. And obviously like you get outputs when they're engaged in the process. So I don't know, like would it be nice to have VBT stuff? Maybe. I don't know how much I would use it because sometimes, like with them, it's like the simpler the better. Like when you add
yeah,
other elements to it, it's like you're doing too much. Maybe like a 1080, an 80 sprint or something like that would be like. But again, I don't know that we need it. It is
yeah,
working, and obviously that doesn't mean like oh, we're just gonna do keep doing what we've always done. But like when you found something that works and you have a system in place, like is adding that gonna help us win more than we already are? I don't know. It'd be hard to do.
yeah, yeah. It's sometimes it's a lot too. Like there's the more I always tell people like the more data that you get, the more data you have to analyze, the more you have to think about what that means. So if you're just getting all this data, which I love the data and I like some of these tools, but the main reason I don't have force plates is because I don't have time to look at all those numbers and still do all the other stuff that I have to do at a high level.
Exactly.
So it's like that is a daunting task in my mind that I'm like, I could just really get into an overthinking type of scenario and then end up doing nothing with the data, which is probably the worst thing.
Right, right. I know. I get people make fun of me all the time. So like if I give a presentation, I'll talk about what I do from a testing standpoint, which like we don't test strength stuff. We'll do jumps and I test their 3/4 court sprint with a stopwatch and people are like a stopwatch. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, if I thought $1,000 set of timing gates was gonna help us win a national championship, like cool, I would do it, but like it doesn't. So why does me using a stopwatch matter? Like, why do I need this fancy equipment to just time a sprint when I'm doing it the same way every single
Yep.
time? But it's just like little things like that that like people think matter. I'm like, does it? Why are we spending so
Hey,
much money on that? I
the
get it. If you're like if you're training a combine player, right, and like you have to be really precise, okay, you have an argument there. But besides that, a team sport athlete, like
I was
where
gonna
there's no
say I was gonna say the NFL can't even get their timing right, so it's
true,
like they're doing
true.
hand start, laser finish, laser start, hand finish. They got it all messed up.
Right,
So it's like
right.
I love the simplicity and I love the um like the it works. Like you trust that I'm gonna do it the same way every time. Is there gonna be human error? Maybe, but there's gonna be human error in sports. So it's like, it's kind of nice and refreshing to hear that even from somebody who likes and enjoys the tech side. It's like nice to detach sometimes.
Yeah, and I think like if there's anything I've learned, it's like we've had a lot of success. We've won a lot of games and our players have been healthy, and nothing else matters if your players aren't healthy. And the reason that they're going to win is because they're healthy, but also you have to have a really good basketball coach and you have to have everybody on staff doing their jobs at a really high level. And our best basketball players have never been the strongest, the fastest, or the most powerful. So if those three things really mattered that much in terms of like you have to really test it and track it and all those things, like that would probably change how I do my job. But what I found is that it doesn't. Like those things are
Hmm.
not directly correlated. So I mean, I'm fortunate I'm in a position where my head coach she cares about what I do and really values it, but she doesn't need to see or care if their vertical goes up 3 inches if they're not playing basketball the way that she
Yeah,
wants them to play basketball on the court. Like she doesn't care what their vertical is or how many chin-ups they can do if they're not doing what they can do or supposed to do on the court. So, but I know that's not always the case, and like a lot of people need that like they need to be validated by numbers and things like that. And but like when it comes to just keeping the main thing, which is winning and developing pros and keeping our athletes healthy, like you kind of you take a step back and realize where to spend your time, your money, and your energy.
I love it. Yeah, that's a fact. Last question I got for you. What is the biggest thing that you've recently changed your mind on when it comes to like training or development of athletes?
There's a lot of things I feel like I just had a conversation the other day with Rob Pacey about like the use of machines in training. I kind of like got indoctrinated into it thinking or being taught that like why would you use a machine when you should be
Hmm.
doing free weights and training movement patterns and all these different things. And then I get to South Carolina where we have this weight room full of different machines. And then you realize that like what really matters is like the our players just need to be loaded. And basketball players aren't inherently good at squatting. They're not good with a barbell. They're not always good with free weights in general. So again, like when you're coming up with what's the highest reward and lowest risk, like sometimes just getting them in a machine where they can load it up in a really safe manner
Hmm.
and just get load in their system is really, really beneficial for a variety of reasons. So I think that's something that's maybe not like most immediate in terms of how I've changed, but over the last few years, like really sort of changed my mind on just what we're doing in the weight room. And then maybe like I think the emphasis on more aerobic means of training and like energy system development. And I think kind of similar, like we're taught that everybody should be doing like these high intensity interval training, sessions, and it should be very sport specific, whatever. And like we don't do a ton of I don't do a ton of conditioning with our players too, but any sort of like extra work that they want to do or any like like we really find ways to sort of manipulate that and have understood and kind of changed my mind on the importance of actually like this kind of slower, longer duration, more aerobic means of training because they don't get that. It is literally high intensity and it's upper threshold all the time. And so that just ability to kind of build their engine, but also allow them to recover better in between training days has been huge, I think, in terms of their durability and just like ability to sort of handle the and tolerate the exposures that they have to go through.
I like it. Those are two good ones. Before I let you get out of here, where can people find more of your resources? Where can people connect with you? Drop some social media handles on us.
Yeah, I would say Instagram. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I would say Instagram is probably, 90% of where I spend my time, but my handle on that is mbinetti22. And I've also got a more basketball sort of specific handle, the at healthy_hooper, which I'm still building out into more basketball specific content, but a lot of resources and just some different things from I guess my career on both of those.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna go follow Healthy Hooper right now. I appreciate your time and joining us today on this episode. This was great. I know people are gonna love it. So thank you.
No, I appreciate you, Justin. Thanks for all you do.